Hey, Jim.
Hey, Steve.
I see over there you have these MoFi inner sleeves.
Yeah.
Is that really pure virgin paper?
Oh, man. And welcome once again to a new episode of Two Guys Talking About Records of Vinyl Community Podcast. My name is Jim. I'm a record store owner.
And I am Steve, a record collector.
And how painful is it sometimes to be a record collector, Steve?
It can be real painful.
To the tune of $25 million settlement from MoFi painful, or are you okay?
Yes. Well, hey, money for everyone.
And all we had to do was get caught.
Yes, that's right.
We will get to that subject matter at hand in just a couple of moments, because if you hadn't heard the news, the Mobile Fidelity label has settled a lawsuit saying that they misled people regarding the, well, let's just say the pureness of their audio quality.
Yeah. Oops.
Oops, indeed. But before we do that, because this is the Vinyl Community Podcast that Vinyl Community loves showing their stuff off, what kind of goodies did you get this week, sir?
I have a few here. It wasn't as big of a week, but I did bring in from the Ramones, Road to Ruin. I got an original of that. I've just never had that. I really stopped at the first couple Ramones albums, a long time ago. Then I had, box set. So I'm trying to pick up a few more of these. There was another group. It's called the Underground Youth. And this was their second album, came out in 2010, but they just reissued it this year, called Mademoiselle. And it's psychedelic and shoegaze. Kind of think Spaceman 3 type of a thing. Even how, Spaceman 3 would do like religious songs and they would make their own spin on it. They also do that. Very, very interesting sounding. It is, a little bit slower of that shoegaze feel to it. So the Underground Youth. And then I picked up, here at Radio Wasteland, The Scientists. And that was their fifth album, Get What You Desire, which is really garage rock, kind of a post-punk from 1985. That was a top-notch album. I have a few Scientists album. This one was really good.
You hadn't heard of that before either.
I had not, no.
Interesting. Glad you got one.
Yep. And then Dead Kennedys and God We Trust from 84. For me, the first few Dead Kennedys are what I really want, but did I need it? No, but it was there looking at me. And what was I to do? It just said, buy me. And all right, I'm weak.
You're a sucker for punk. I do know that.
Yes.
So keep an eye out for you.
What about you?
Just a couple this week. I picked up and, opened the new copy of the Samantha Fish, Jesse Dayton album called Death Wish Blues. I'm a Samantha Fish fan. She was here in our area pre-pandemic to play a blues fest down in Freeland. I think it was probably in 19, and just a great performer in her own right. And I've loved the blues that she's put out, real heavy guitar, slide guitar blues, think Stevie Ray Vaughan type of stuff. But her past couple of albums have leaned a little bit toward the poppy nature of things. So much so that there was even like a rap interlude in one of her last ones that caught me by surprise. I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't guitar blues straight up like it. Like this album, she goes back to her roots along with this Austin musician named Jesse Dayton. And they've created just a real good, gritty guitar blues album in Death Wish Blues.
Okay.
So it's a fun one. Then the other one, just this morning, I picked up a copy of Dobie Gray's Drift Away. It's a 1973 Decca. So this may go into the personal collection. I've got to decide beyond the one-hit wonder nature of the song if I dig the rest of it.
Yeah, that's, the 70s, the classic one-hit wonder albums. That's so many of them. But a lot of them, they were very good when you listen to the rest of the album.
You get beyond that hit, and you got some funk and soul in there, and that's what I'm hoping with this. But we had a collection come in last night, right before close, about maybe 90 albums or so, mostly classic rock, and this was in there. So I'm going to take that record store privilege and scan it first and see. One other quick story before we get this. This collection that came in was a little dirty on the outside. All the records, the vinyl's going to need washing too, so we'll get on that. I mean, Abby will get on that. And but I cleaned the outsides, the outer sleeves this morning, and I opened one up, and it was from the Grassroots, and it was the album More Golden Grass, and it's a gatefold, and I open it up, and gee, you'll never guess what came tumbling out all over our counter.
There was some golden grass, free samples.
Well, the seeds at the very
The
least.
seeds.
So it's like, if I were well, now they're boomers now, but if I was that type of person in the 60s and early 70s, you think there'd be maybe a less subtle place to hide your stash?
That's right. They had to find, where did I put it? Oh, yeah, the album that says that's where it's. This is a memory thing.
Man, you're never going to believe where I hid my stash, man. Into the golden grass, man. So that was, well, interesting to say the least. 40-year-old pot seeds come tumbling all over my counter here in a dry county.
It's vintage, though.
There we go. Well, onward to well, you know what? That's side note. We could probably do a show on interesting things found in albums. Maybe we'll mark that one down for a future date. But on to the subject at hand. If you hadn't heard the news this past week, the Mobile Fidelity record label, MoFi, more commonly known, has reached a settlement in a brewing lawsuit from last year over, well, best way to put this is kind of misleading their customers as far as their process of creating their high fidelity releases. The understanding really has always been, and at least to my knowledge, that when Mobile Fidelity released something, it was from the original analog master tapes. And, well, they got caught with their pants down last year, didn't they?
Yes. And the understanding is correct. We all assumed that it's all from the original analog tapes. Now, did the album necessarily say that? No, but it used to be that way, and then they just began going to the digital route, and, well, let's just not bother mentioning, there's no need to.
Yeah, just say, well, they're high fidelity.
Yes.
Now, MoFi as a label, they predate the whole digital revolution in music. That predates it. Now, the only two MoFi albums I own, let me get that right out there, are a copy of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which I believe was either a late 70s pressing, I have to look that back up, and a copy of Rush's Permanent Waves. Now, for me, the fidelity of those, yeah, it's important. I own other copies of those, but I wanted each of those rather, for my collection because I like a lot of the Floyd stuff and, of course, the Rush. So whether or not they were MoFi is just an added bonus for me. I wanted those copies of that particular album, of those two particular albums. The added fidelity of that, yay or nay, they sound good. I'm not going to argue that. But what about you? You've got a few in yours, too.
I do. I'm trying to think. I'm not even quite sure right off the top of my head how many, but maybe 20 to 30. For instance, anything that comes out from Miles Davis from MoFi, I buy it. That's my one artist that I would be a completist on. So I do get the MoFis for that. When I was kind of rebuilding the collection back up, well, still am, I was picking up different MoFis and bringing that in just because I wanted the best sound. And I might have an original, but I thought, wouldn't this be great? I have this. It's even a better sound. And so for a while there, I was really looking at that. A MoFi email would come through, and I'm scanning it. Oh, what do I need to have? But I really started to change my tune around that. And it wasn't because of the scandal. It was just the fact that, can I really hear a difference?
The MoFi themselves, they're pricey to begin with, even on the aftermarket. The Floyd one that I mentioned, good copies, nice clean copies of that can fetch triple digits, if not more. Rush was the same way. But again, the new ones, they're up there now. They list anywhere between maybe $120 upwards to $250, depending upon the contents of the packaging.
Yeah, the price keeps going up. And people buy them. Obviously, they can keep raising prices because people do keep buying them. It's just you get to this point that how much do I want to pluck out for a single album versus all this other stuff? And do I find it better than an original? And to me, so much of that comes down to your stereo. If you have a $10,000, $20,000 stereo system, and Lord knows they go much higher than that, there's no doubt you probably can hear a difference. It's there. But if you just have a regular run-of-the-mill, I have a Pioneer receiver and a realistic turntable. It's very nice. But I can't say that if I put two things on, it may sound better, but is it $100 better than an original?
That's the existential crisis you face on this. The other thing that comes into play is as we get older, our ears, our hearing tends to deteriorate. You know this very well. But my life, I'm approaching 60, 58 now, and probably 40 plus years of that have been with headphones of some kind, especially the time that I was in radio, blasting that out. And as it is now, I do have some difficulty hearing in crowded situations like bars or restaurants where that hearing is deteriorated. My father, if I can share this story as well, we grew up on a farm, so he was a farmer on a tractor a lot. His hearing has deteriorated to the point where he can't hear certain frequencies. Yep. Several years ago, we were in a hunting cabin for a few days, and there was a cricket inside with us, and it was driving me insane. He, for the life of him, couldn't hear it because that cricket, that little bit of variance of the cricket frequencies, were in the zone that's dead to him. He's like, I don't hear a single thing. So that's going to come into play too as we get older, whether it be by accident through running tractors or playing music too loud or going to many concerts, or just the normal aging process. We're going to lose some of that hone of the frequencies that we can pick up.
It just a side note for anybody that's worried about hearing, if you're throwing a firecracker, don't put it next to your ear and then suddenly find you have a short fuse and it blows, because by my teenage year, I pretty much knocked out the hearing in one of my ears. It rang for days. Hearing aid takes care of it. But it does make a difference. And, I can't hear the higher frequencies on something like that. So, yes, as we get older, sure, you can crank up your stereo louder, like you can crank up your TV louder, but that just makes all the sounds louder, doesn't necessarily define it. So that's also part of this, that I have to, I rethink, is it really necessary?
I think this is a good point then to back up a little bit, maybe give some information to those that aren't quite certain what the whole fuss was about with Mobile Fidelity and the difference between an analog master and a digital copy of that. And I'm going to go back to my college teaching days and talk about this, when the advent of digital music came about, think back to the Napster days and the early MP3s, the whole process of, and compact discs actually too, the process of digitizing music from the analog stimulus that we're used to through our normal everyday back and forth hearing, or the analog capture rather, on vinyl, or even to things like reel-to-reel tape or cassette tape, that is a truer representation of the full spectrum of the audio frequencies recreated. The digital prospect of that has to narrow down those frequencies based on size stipulations. A compact disc or a digital file can only be so large, and because of that, certain portions of certain frequencies, whether they be silence, high end, or certain cutoff of low end, had to be eliminated to make these audio files fit into their respective holders, if you will. That wasn't really the case, other than limited by the size of the record and the grooves, or the length of a cassette tape. So digital had its advent in making things easier, but at the expense of cutting off some of the frequencies. And this is the whole root of the argument, well, analog sounds better than digital because it's a truer representation.
Collectors want this analog. And you just look at how this market has exploded. For decades, MoFi owned this market. They were it. It was very exclusive. To get one, you didn't find them in your normal record stores. But now you look at, Blue Note has Tone Poets. There is One Steps, which is another type of MoFi, even more expensive. UHQR, Craft Recording. And I just heard Rhino is now coming in with their own audiophile type recordings.
Really?
So a lot of these albums, they have Rocktober, right? Rhino's really big with that. Now we're going to take these albums and we're going to make them a gatefold. We're going to put an obi strip on them because we know an obi strip is worth a whole lot of money, and it's a pain in the ass because you got to now pull that off. They're going to give you some extra liner notes, and now we're going to charge you $40 to $50 for that album because you're getting this, but it's better, and supposedly Kevin Gray is doing this. Now, I don't know how Kevin Gray can do all of this. I mean, every time you get an audio, Kevin Gray, mix this. What? How's this guy do that? I don't get it. But so Rhino is now entering the fray, but it's a big deal. It's a big market, and people want this.
When you get thinking about some of these older releases, and this is where MoFi got into trouble. Early on with those earlier releases, they would make their master stampers for the records from those original analog master tapes. But the master tapes are a physical media. They wear out over time, just like any other record or tape will, and especially magnetic mediums, because that will deteriorate over time as well. So what MoFi did was, well, you know what? We can only play these master tapes a certain number of times before we destroy them. And some of them, from some of these big artists, are priceless. I mean, they're absolutely priceless. So they would make this extremely high-quality digital copy of that master and then use that to create multiple other stampers for the process of creating their audiophile vinyl. And where they got caught then was like a YouTuber asked the question, well, wait a minute, how are you making a pressing of 30,000 of these, when you get maybe 2,000 to 3,000 out of a plate and you have to make a new one? Are you actually making a new dub off of that analog master tape for every 2,000 records you're doing? And MoFi was forced to admit, well, the original master tape was made to make that digital file.
Yeah.
And then we made the stampers off of that. That's what got them into trouble, was just not being transparent.
Sure. And in the past, they didn't make that MIDI MoFi. It was always extremely limited. Again, they were the only ones there, but there wasn't this, all these people wanting it. I will say one thing about the vinyl community. It has brought up these type of recordings, and there's all these channels that talk about it. There's all collectors that specifically deal only with this high-end recordings, and that's great. But it's gotten so many more people excited. I mean, I used to watch these, and I would get, oh my God, I think I need to have it. It's the old FOMA, fear of missing out. And I would go and I would order some of this, and I have, $125 for an album, which is basically a box, and then you open it up, and there's the album in there. Supposedly it's going to sound really great on my stereo system. I'm not sure, but I was part of this, and I was really I would get really excited, and I have backed way off. Nothing to do with MoFi. It's just the fact that the way the pricing in this market has gone, because there's a demand. If you have a demand, we can charge more. How far can we go before we find what's the breaking point on this?
This controversy is going to, I think, play into this specifically. One of the interesting side notes, you mentioned the YouTubers who kind of, I don't want to use the word caught, but really brought this to light and forced MoFi to say, well, okay, so there's a digital step in the process. Sorry, we should have told you. A side note to this was a YouTuber, and I don't remember who it is. I've watched him a few times, but he's really kind of a grumpy one on there who really just feels like complaining about everything in the vinyl community. He called out some of these other YouTubers that you're mentioning that are all the audiophiles and said, wait a minute, if you guys are so smart and you can actually tell the difference between a MoFi release or a half-speed master or a regular pressing, why didn't you know just from your ears that MoFi was going digital with these? So that was an interesting point he made, albeit a little bit more crassly than that, calling these folks out. Mm-hmm. But that's a good point as well. It's like, if you're an audiophile and you swear up and down that you can tell the difference, how come you didn't tell the difference before this came out?
That was the part actually I was chuckling at because you hear these people, we're doing these shootouts and we're going to try this and that, and I go, well, I don't know, I guess it sounds better. I'm just taking your word on this, and then when it comes back and go, well, okay, I was listening to you, but is it better or not? I don't know. And now suddenly everyone's, well, no, it's not as good. And yes, there's been a lot of backpedaling on that.
That gets back to our other discussion is, can we really tell the difference?
Yeah.
We had a customer in the other day and they wanted to get an older copy of Dark Side of the Moon. I've got a reissue here. Well, they said, well, I'd heard that the older copies sound better than the remasters. My thought on that is, okay, get what you want to get. We don't have one now, but if you think that that's going to sound better, because it's an earlier pressing, take into consideration these are now 50 years old in some case, and every time they're played, there's a little bit more wear and tear on the grooves that take away from the sound. If the needle's got a tick or two in it, you're going to get sound. So maybe these older pressings sound better, maybe the MoFi sound better, but can that stack up against the newer technology in the pressings with these remasters?
That's a really good point. Oftentimes, I spend a lot of time trying to find originals. I like the excitement of original, and I am willing to put up with a little snap and a crackle because it's just this is what originally came out. But if it's really bad, I will try to get a newer copy, so something that I can play and really enjoy. And even with MoFi, most all my MoFis, I have an original copy of something because I didn't want to wear out the grooves in my MoFi. And now, again, I've totally been rethinking. I am not jumping into, like a Tone Poet. If you watch, eventually they start going on clearance, and I'll pop into that. The UHQRs, they're coming off all kinds of new stuff. MoFi's coming with all this Van Halen. I was excited at first, but now wow, that is so much of my money that is going to go into this, that's going to prevent me from buying something else. Is going to prevent me from coming to my local record store to kind of go through what's new, unless I decide to tell my wife, really pork and beans is great to have 7 days a week, yummy, and SpaghettiOs doesn't get better than this, honey. Trust me on this. But you have to make that decision. Now, the collectors of this, and there are a lot of people that this is what they want to collect, and that is great. They have the budget, they can do it. But I think for most of us collectors, it becomes almost more of a hardship to get that. So you have to decide what you really, really want. How important is this to you that you're going to get this? Is your stereo, are you going to be able to tell the difference? Or is it just going to be an investment? And a lot of people will do that. I got a MoFi, look how much it's worth. It becomes this investment. Or is it something that, truly like a Miles Davis, I'm going to look at and it gives me a warm fuzzy.
And that goes back to, my Dark Side and my Rush Permanent Waves MoFis. I wanted them because of my personal collecting desires on that. Do they sound good? Heck yes, they do. But they better for what I pay for. But can I definitively say they sound as good as brand new virgin vinyl of the same release? Not really.
Yeah, I have the same problem, and so I just don't find the market for me. But since more people are getting into it, we know that it is a growing market. It is out there. I just heard even MoFi now was looking at digital streaming. They are going to make super high quality streaming for those audiophiles that want to stream and hear something better. They're trying to find a new market because they owned this audio market forever. And now there's so many other people taking their money. It has to hurt.
I'm sorry I'm smiling. I just find it amusing that after this kerfuffle that MoFi says, maybe we should get into digital streaming.
Well, we got the tapes for it.
We got the files ready to go.
Right. We are set up.
We're going to launch with this digital stream of all the Van Halen reissues. Because they've been delaying those too, by the way. And I think that I don't know, I can't say for certain, but the Van Halen releases have been seeing delay after delay after delay. So maybe the settlement had a little bit to do with that.
It could be. Wow. And I know we were talking before. It's just the other thing is, they come up now with a 45 RPM. So yeah. You have that album. Now we made it too because we know 45 RPM is going to be much better sounding. Well, I could take any album, put it on 45 RPM. It's just I get through the album faster. So now we have that, and it's breaking up this album. That maybe the artist shouldn't be broken up. And again, do you hear it as well? I just know that it makes me get up more often, and I don't want to get up.
100% agree with you on that. 3 songs or 2 songs aside, I might as well be playing 45 7-inches at that point.
Yeah.
And having fun with that. But now the settlement itself, let's talk about this just a little bit for anyone that's curious. I am not going to be eligible, obviously. I bought my 2 MoFis in the aftermarket. They're older. They predate the digital era. You, however, might because you purchased a couple directly from MoFi.
Yes, most of mine have been bought in the last 3 years. and I bought it right off. All my Miles Davis were bought that way. I have some used, but almost all of them were bought. So I'm thinking $100,000 for me, something like that, because I have oh my God, the emotion, the stress. It has been off. I don't sleep at night. It's given me back problems. That's all MoFi.
Well, here's the thing. After this all came to light, a class action lawsuit was started by a couple of folks, and MoFi reached a settlement with the initial filers of this. And there was a little bit of a dust-up with a judge stepping in saying, no, the original settlement that MoFi has reached with the original parties is good enough. And the initial amount right now is $25 million settlement to customers of MoFi. And you can opt for one of three things if you have purchased from them, according to the settlement that we're reading about. They're calling it a fair compromise. The company has agreed to let consumers either secure a full refund for their purchases, you got to send them back, or they could keep their albums and instead take a 5% cash refund or a 10% refund in credit if you decide to keep the albums. Or you can get your full refund and send them back. So the agreement, according to this from Billboard, would cover all customers nationwide, and the total monies they're expecting that could be paid out by MoFi could go over that $25 million mark. So the real winners in all of this? The lawyers.
Yes. Yeah, the lawyers, they always win. God bless them.
So, I feel a little bit for MoFi, but this is kind of a bed of their own making, just by not saying, if they had come through, 10 years ago and said, listen, these master tapes are precious. We cannot risk damaging them, so we're going to take a digital step in the intermediary and preserve as much of the audio file and the audio fidelity as we can. But just so you know, there is a digital step in here. I think they would have been okay.
Yeah, I agree. That was wow. You should maybe you should be working for some. That was well put. You are right. But what a nice way to explain it. If you want to preserve this master cop, we have to do something. Yeah. And it's correct.
I mean, the last thing they would want to do would be to destroy, the only surviving master tape of a Doors album or something from Floyd or something like that. There's other artists or their estates I know that are extremely protective of these master tapes, and with good reason. They're important.
Yes. Yep, they are. And that's why some don't even release them. You can't even get them. No one's allowed to make other recordings. I think we talked once before about Led Zeppelin. Yep. You're not finding any of that. He's not releasing it to anybody.
Well, that's Jimmy Page, too, holding on to these with a very tight grip.
Uh-huh. I don't know where he's going. He's getting to that age. Eventually, what's he going to do with it? He can't take it. Maybe he can take it with him.
You never know. But, it would end up like Prince and the Prince estate, where they're releasing everything and he left a lot behind.
He did.
I'm expecting a full triple LP release of Prince's answering machine messages coming up soon because of that. So if you're a customer of MoFi, Mobile Fidelity, I guess you could probably look into this and see if you're eligible for this, a portion of the settlement. What would you do? Thinking about the Miles Davis MoFi that you got from them, it's an important album to you. Would you send that back just because of this?
No, I wouldn't. It's not worth. I have it for a reason. I didn't buy it because I thought, oh my God, this is analog. I bought it because I knew it would be a better pressing. Even if there's digital, it doesn't matter. I wanted the best pressing of this Miles Davis that I can find. Now, of course, my assumption is that this is the best pressing, and I believe it is. I wouldn't send any of my MoFi back. This wasn't something that haunted me when it came out. It was just like, well, you got caught. Oh, well, poor you. I bought MoFi since then. It wasn't like I stopped. People were thinking there would be a run on everyone would be selling off all their MoFis. Now they're checking Discogs. Oh, the prices, are they going to drop? Are they going to fall? And they went down maybe a little, but it wasn't like this big sell-off. Yeah. They're keeping them. It's still an investment. Very, very much so an investment, along with all these other companies. And again, you just look at everybody's getting into this. This is the expanding market, but it's the most profitable market. Your profit margins with this is by far greater than just your regular record album. So every company wants to get into it.
Hence the demand. If people are willing to pay for it, then they're going to charge it.
Yes, yes. And we'll find out what your breaking point is. We'll push it up a little more and we will see, and eventually they figure out that breaking point.
So my only question then left for you is, if you're going to keep your MoFi, what would you opt to take your 10% discount on as part of the settlement? Are you looking at these Van Halen, or should I keep an eye out for a Barry Manilow MoFi for you?
Ooh, there's probably a Carpenter's one too.
Joan Baez.
Oh my God, you're giving me a Judy Collins MoFi. Yeah, I thought about, it could be 5%. I would probably go more apt for a 10% because I know I'll still buy some MoFi, but it's not a lot. I'm just really picky and choosy because I would rather spend my money on newer stuff or finding some originals.
And there you have it. All right, well, great talk on this. I mean, does it affect us? Well, a little bit. I can see that too, but is it earth-shattering in the scope that a lot of the vinyl community purists were talking about? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
All right, Steve. Well, have a great one. Thank you again so much for listening to two guys talking about records. What are we going to talk about next? We're talking about records.
More records.
More records. Keep getting them.
Yes.
All right, I'm Jim, a record store owner.
And I'm Steve, a record collector.
Thank you guys for being here, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye.